Hello, my friends. Let me begin with a disclaimer, and pardon my, unusually crabby tone, but this is not directed at the people who are lovely humans. So I'm going to talk about Sybilla and my experience with it, and look at some of the decks that are out there, and approach it from my reform point of view. And for anyone out there who's a purist, who's looking to argue or tell me I'm wrong, good for you. I'm not interested in that conversation. I've had it before, so thank you for your interest. This may piss you off, so you might want to stop watching and explore some of the quote better videos out there. For everyone else who's interested in coming on this ride with me, let's talk about Sybilla. Boink. So, I want to do a few things. I want to show you some of the decks that I have, well, all of the decks that I have for this, and just talk a little bit about how I use it, and why I've had more luck with this than, let's say, Lenormand. And I'll talk more about that. I will say that I have given the book a try. I think it's well written. I have some problems with it, and I won't get into that. But it's out there. It's on Amazon. It's part one of what really is this author's course, and from what I can see, basically, to get like the author's real sort of like juice, you need to be accepted to her course. So the book is there. It's really the only one that's out there, and given that the little white books that come with these are not especially helpful, that may be a route you want to go. I feel like you don't really need the books, honestly. Like anything else, it's about question and context. So let's just look at what I got. Whoops. Hey, we thought we might get through a video without me knocking over the tripod, but that's not to be. So the first one that we have is the Everyday Oracle, which is sort of this is the most common one. And I'll look at these. This is interesting. It's called Sybilla Oracle cards, but they are very much not... Well, there are differences between all of these, but the differences here are sort of really odd. I mean, not odd, whatever. It's a cartomancy deck, but it doesn't feel as close to Sybilla as the rest do. Um, I, I don't hate this deck. I did a reading with it, and I thought, oh, yeah, that's pretty clear. But it's not, it doesn't feel like it's actually Sybilla. There's also a card in this deck. I recognize that the art comes from another time, but it's just racially problematic. And so I really wouldn't recommend this one to anyone because I think, even if you like this deck personally, I really wouldn't read with it for someone else. I just, I think it's not ideal. So we'll take that out of the pile. This is the Gypsy Oracle cards, which is a Sybilla deck, contrary to its name. All the first three, by the way, are Los Scarabeo. So this one, very close to this. Some slight differences I will point out, and I honestly like them both sort of equally. This one I've had the longest, and it's been my most used. This one is the newest, and I kind of, I like, for a difference, I actually like it. But they're so similar, honestly, that I think it's a matter of taste, and we'll explore. Here's the Il Meneghello version, which I'm not going to really do much in the way of comparison. But it's really nice. It's not, I sort of wish that it were that great art stock that they're so known for. This is like a glossy, almost like photo stock, which isn't bad. I think it's the same art more or less as the Everyday Oracle, or similar to it. This is not in order. The rest I did put into an order. Order is questionable when it comes to this anyway. But I don't use this deck a whole lot because it doesn't super shuffle well. Although it does break in a little bit. Also, on the decks that have only Italian titles, I've which is this one, I've had to write the English title on it, and I don't particularly want to write on this, so maybe like once I kind of have the names down a little bit better, I can use that. But in the Il Meneghello way, it's beautifully packaged, it's beautifully done, it's just their classic stuff. It's hand cut, so the cards are different sizes, and It's just really lovely. So this looks nice on the shelf. I don't use this version all that much. Another version I don't use all that much, but that I like quite a lot, and it's for the same reason, which is that it has Italian titles, and I don't super want to write on it. So, but I will sort of show as I go through. Also, just from a size perspective, it's a lot. It's a lot bigger, but it really is beautiful. I mean, I think artistically of the bunch, it's the loveliest. I found this through Elle from Sacred Seed. She did a video on this, and when I saw this, I had to have it. So I think I got this on BG Tarot, if I'm not mistaken. It's definitely not a deck that's easy to get in the United States. You have to get it from someone who stocks Italian cartomancy, so tarots and the like. But with that, it wasn't a lot. I think because the deck itself is expensive, but the shipping was a fair amount more, I wound up buying something else with it to sort of make the shipping more because the shipping was the same either way, but I think I just paid more to make, to get more out of the shipping. So let's take a closer look at the cards. I don't think necessarily that it's worth doing a walkthrough of all of them. What I sort of wanted to do is just kind of compare a little bit the look and the names, because there are some slight differences. They do come with little white books. This is La Magica Sibilla by Del Negro. It's Italian. Its book is entirely in Italian. The Gypsy Oracle cards has English in it, but there's not much. This little white book actually it may be all you need. So this is from the Everyday Oracle. By the way, these two and the other one that I don't recommend are really cheap. Online. So let's talk about some differences. So this one comes with significator cards, which you don't really need, because there are cards that can be used as significators here. But beyond that, it comes with, and then some Italian cards. So there's that. And you can see how lovely the art is right out of the gate. Now, should I zoom? I think I should zoom, but I think I need to move things over. Let's do that. Now, putting things in order, whoopsie. Putting things in order is a weird state of affairs, because there really isn't one. I mean, it's based on a 52 pack of cards, so there's not like an order. So what I did was I put it in order by suits, as it's listed in the little white book. This, which is the Gypsy Oracle cards, does not have numbers or card insets on them. This has numbers and card insets, but they are the Italian names for the suits. So you have to know what the correspondences are letter-wise, because it's not a symbol. I wish it were. The Il Manighello has the modern symbol on it. And then this one has the modern symbol because it's a more modern deck. So, these are in an order, but what I did was there's in between these two decks there's a few where the card names are sort of different, and it took me a little bit of like investigating to figure out sort of what went where. So I wanted to start with these two. There's three sets. So this one we've got worry, and we've got sorrow. I honestly prefer worry over sorrow because there's other sort of sad cards, but it doesn't super matter. So the next one is in this deck there's longings, and this one is sighs. And that's sighs as in not in what size do you wear. And then we have, again, I sort of prefer this one, which is lookout or view, and this one, which is waiting, just because I think this is a little more versatile. By and large, like, the titles are pretty clear across the board, but these are the three that were varied enough that I had to sort of work to figure out which was which. So now I'll just sort of flip through and kind of compare. Again, these are all in Italian, but you get the sense. We've got conversation, and it's the same in all. This is really the same too. It's house. But it's really it's not house as much as it is home. So you can sort of see the art style. Oh, see, this would have gone. The Italian name for this is Belvedere, with my English, which suggests more view than it does waiting or sort of looking, which is why I like the versatility of that over this one. But for the most part, the rest of them are pretty consistent. So love, this is joyousness or joyous heart. Money. This one's interesting. I kind of like this one, which is artist, but in the older version it's man of letters, and in this one it's scholar. I kind of like the idea of artist or man of letters, but it's fine either way. This is. Sorry, I always forget that when the phone rings, I cut out of the video, and that just happened. So I'm gonna have to remember that when I edit this. This is hope. Faithfulness, constancy. Again, they are really constant as they were across the board. This is let me go through this. So there's an interesting thing here. I mentioned there's significator cards in this deck, but you kind of have significators here. So you have like two lover cards in the older deck. You have a man and a woman lover. In this one, you have lover and you have sweetheart, but it's kind of the same thing. You also get that here, innamorato and innamorata. For me, that sort of serves as the male and female significators. So there's that to know. Beyond that, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, they really are consistent. The names are just slight variations. So if you wanted to see a walkthrough of any of these decks, they're out there. So I don't want to do a whole walkthrough for you unless anyone wants me to. You can certainly request that. But what I wanted to talk a little bit about more was how I'm sort of working with these cards for readings, and how I sort of make them make sense to me, and how I don't necessarily feel like you need a book. Which one? I'm just going to use this one for the moment because it's smaller, so I can fit more of it. So here are some things that I have learned and some experiences that I've just, engaged as I go through this. So, I think that reversals are necessary in reading this way, and that is, it is common. And I do think that it helps a lot, honestly. So I do start by reversing the cards, and there's many ways to do it. That's just how I go about it with tarot and anything else that uses reversals. This wasn't in order, so I'm going to give it a shuffle. This cardstock is not, it's not the most, it's a little rigid. I imagine it'll soften up over time, but like this of the bunch that I showed you has kind of like the cheapest cardstock of the lot. But kind of aesthetically, I really prefer this one. I like the dark edges. I did edge it myself in black, but so let's just shuffle. A few other things. So reversals, yes, absolutely. I think that's important with this. It does add nuance I find really helpful. And the way that I read reversals, I'll show you as I go through an example. But it's kind of really straight up sort of opposite, which again is not traditional. Each card has an upright and reverse meaning that's different, and sometimes they are or seemingly unrelated. Not interested in that. Doesn't make sense to me. I also believe that if you watch my videos, you know how I feel about general readings, right? Readings without a question. For tarot, I do them all the time because that's what people want. And so far be it from me to not. You know what I mean? Like, I prefer as a reader to be specific and give you better information, but some people don't want that. Some people just need to kind of get a check-in and know what's going on, and I'm totally okay with that. For things like this, I think I don't think I would do it without a question. I think you need a question to answer, especially given how sort of weirdly specific the card names are. I talk a lot about in tarot how context matters, how the card meanings and the card contexts and the relationship to the cards in the spread and the relationship of the cards to each other and to the question matter. I don't quite know how you would go about doing something like this, something more cardomantic in this way without a question. But that doesn't mean you couldn't. I just feel like this is particularly suited to answering the question. So, and they can be general questions, but I think that there needs to be a question. So, let's just, for example, use, what's going on in my love life. Let's say that I have someone who's asking me that question. All right, so I've shuffled. I could use a significator if I wanted to. I actually don't, I don't necessarily need to, so I'm not gonna take that. So I may need to zoom out to fit all these in, but we'll see. So I like doing 9-card spreads with just about everything. I'm gonna zoom out. So that's how I'll start, because I just find it really useful. So I split. I'm not gonna use a significator. You could, but I'm not going to. So I get out 9 cards. Can you see that? Let me move these up a skosh. Oh, glare. Boo. Alright. How's that look? Bit better. Alright. So now I start sort of trying to find relationships between the weirdly sort of dated names on these cards and the question I'm being asked and the relationship between them. All right, so I always look at the middle. It's a trick I learned, I think, either from Kelly from The Truth and Story or from Caitlin Matthews. I can't remember where I got that from, but it sort of tells me kind of the theme. So I've got sighs reversed, which in the other deck is longing. So I'm gonna kind of go with longing because I like that better. I think it's more specific. And I've also got the sweetheart. I think, is that what that is? Yeah, the sweetheart card. So interestingly, that's what I would have used as a significator for the current if I had used one, and it represents her. So I've got longing reversed, and I've got the sweetheart reversed. So right out of the gate, I have an interesting sort of conundrum here. They want to know what's going on with their love life, and I'm getting a sense that they're not super interested in one. Because the longing card is reversed, right? So, and this is them, this sort of represents that person. So they are both reversed, and it suggests that their love life isn't the most important thing to them right now. So now the reading, I'm going to explore sort of why. Now, I'm going to talk through a bit more than I normally would for like an actual reading, just to kind of share with you how I'm coming to these conclusions. So I'm coming to the conclusion that they're not interested in a reading because this doesn't mean anything to me right now other than that it's the person I'm reading for. And they are upside down, which suggests to me this isn't something that's super important to them in their lives right now. I have longing reversed. So they're not really longing for a relationship, or they're kind of half-heartedly longing for one. So now I let the rest of the reading kind of explore why. So I've got thief reversed and I've got falseness in the first row. So this suggests to me that this person sort of feels like people are fake and that they're not trustworthy. They're not necessarily thieves. Reversed there, I sort of feel like, oh, they're not stealing anything. But she's just like, people are fake. People are out to get what they want. They're out to get theirs. They're not necessarily trying to take what's yours, but they are trying to get what's theirs, if that makes sense. So they're not a thief, but they're opportunistic. So that's what the reverse thief means to me. And then falseness means, that they're fake. Now, so that's what this row suggests. They're not super interested right now because people in general are fake and they're just out for themselves. Now, in this row, I have faithfulness and I have obviously longing and I have conversation. So what seems to me mostly what this person enjoys is like their faithful friends, the people they get together with and talk to, and that, like, those relationships feel really solid. And that just comes from faithfulness and conversation. You know what I mean? Faithful friends, faithful get-togethers, they long for that. They're not necessarily longing for love in that way. In the bottom row, I've got sorrow, which in the other deck again is worry or anxiety. And I can go either way. I prefer anxiety, so I'm just going to go with that, or worry. So worry reversed, or sorrow reversed, with pleasure seekers and doctor. So right now for her sadness or her sorrow or her anxiety is made healed, is made better by her friends, by the pleasure seekers in her life, by the people who are out there to have fun and not take. So now I can look at the columns, although I have a pretty good picture right now that, like, what's going on in your love life is really that you're more interested in your friends than in a partner, because your view of partners are that they're kind of like opportunistic fakers. But I can do the columns if I want to. So I've got, again, my querent upside down. I've got her faithful friends, and I've got anxiety reversed. So I've got this thing of like, what's grounding to her are people that are faithful, and that she's very interested in faithfulness. Which, creates an interesting thing here, right? Because in this row, we have these like opportunistic fakers, or even, a covert faker, a lying faker. What she values to her is faithfulness, which may suggest fidelity. You know what I mean? Infidelity makes her anxious. We've got longing, we've got thief reversed, longing reversed, and pleasure seekers in the middle column. So again, she doesn't want fake people who are just out for like good times. She's not interested in like good time Charlies. Falseness, conversation, and doctor, the people in the world that she finds false or fake, she's healed by her friends, she's healed by her community. So she doesn't want that in her community. Now this could suggest to a degree that there is someone in her community that is like someone's gossiping, because we have false conversation with a doctor. But I think in the context of this reading, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, because the doctor is a very healing presence and the conversation has been a very healing presence. So I feel to a degree like the falseness is healed by her community, by the people around her. So that to me is like a pretty quick answer to what's going on in her love life. That and everything just sort of supported more or less what I already knew as I go through. And that's important to me as a reader, because it reminds me of what Camellia Elias talks about, which is that you want to find evidence in the reading. And that's one reason I read the way I do. I do this with tarot as well. When I do a 9 card, I look at these to kind of give me my thesis, and I try to find in the rest of the reading the whys. Why is this happening? How is it happening? Or even better, why, how, and like support for my original idea. So my original idea was that she wasn't really desiring a relationship. The rest of this explained why, and it supports my overall view that she's not super interested in dating right now. So let me show you another example. Now, reading for a fake person is always easier than reading for a real person, because, of course, you don't have anyone there to tell you you're wrong. You know what I mean? But, wrong. I won't get into that conversation about right and wrong. Um, I covered a little bit in my book, just to plug that again. We're getting closer. You know what? Even as I'm shuffling this, I can feel it getting, more pliable. So that's good news. I actually, I like the two decks that the Everyday Oracle and the Gypsy Oracle, pretty equally. I like the titles a little bit more in the Everyday Oracle, but as you can see, I'm just working with the ones that I know, you know. Let's say that this is a person who is applying for a job and they want to know if they're going to get it and why. So this is a guy who has been unemployed for a while, is applying for a job at a company recommended to him by his friend, and he wants to know if he's going to get the job and why. Yes or no questions are something I've been struggling a lot with, particularly when it comes to something like, I haven't been struggling with them. I've been struggling with whether or not I think they're effective, because things change and actions change, motivations change, reasons change. And so when something's in development, yes or no questions can be harmful. I think harmful in a gentle sense, because the energy around something at that moment could suggest that it's not going to happen, but then the next day it could, because someone asked a question, or a motive changed, or someone had a revelation. You know what I mean? Whoa. So, yes or no questions, but whys will help. So why will I get this job, and why this guy wants to know. And it's probably worth noting that he's super interested because he needs money. All right. So I could pick a card to represent work. In that case, I'd probably pick the maid or the servant. But I'm not going to, again, I kind of like going without significators. Whoops, gosh, I'm very poppy today. So we've got, this is lightness, frivolity in this deck. I think it's lightness in the other one. Wedding, service, reunion. I think this was upright, fortune. We're just going to go with that because this isn't even a read. So this is something really interesting. All right. So is he going to get the job? Well, I've got frivolity or lightness reversed, and I've got wedding as my first two. So seriousness is essentially what I would read lightness reversed as. And wedding is sort of like the ring in Lenormand. It's sort of a union or a contract. So right out of the gate, it looks like there's going to be a serious commitment. So good, right? We want to find out. The question was, will I get the job and why? So I look at the rows again. This one's a little more nuanced, and in particular because of the bottom row, I've got enemy and foe, which is really interesting. And I don't know how I'm going to interpret that yet. We'll see. But that's one of the weird things about this kind of old deck. You have two enemy cards in it. In the Everyday Oracle, they're both labeled enemy. This one is, the male is enemy, and the... All right, let's keep I'm having a weird day, and my phone is ringing a lot. Yeah, so where the hell was I? Talking about this guy getting a job. Sorry, I'm completely distracted. It's been a weird week. So anyway, I said seriousness, which is lightness reversed, and wedding. So there is like a serious commitment to service and a reunion. So I'm looking at this as like a reunion with work. So there's a commitment to reuniting with work. So it seems like, yes, he's going to get the job. Now, good fortune, but interestingly, we have Doctor reversed. So what he's going to have to be aware of is that this job could be stressful. It could be grinding. You know what I mean? It could cost him, but monetarily, it looks like he's gonna be in good shape. But it's going to be serious, and it's not going to be necessarily a spa day. So here's really the interesting row, right? And here's where I have to really do some work. So the bottom row is joyfulness, and then I have these two enemies, right? So what I'm getting is like there's that he's gonna get the job, but it's like it's gonna be the enemy of joyfulness. You know what I mean? Like we've got these two, and they're both looking this way at Joy. So I'm wondering if this job is going to really cost him a lot of his social life, a lot, a lot of his joy. Like, if this is not the right opportunity for this guy, despite the fact that he's been out of work for a while. It's interesting. Now, I talk a lot about how lately I prefer written readings. Here's one reason why. Because what I want to do is look at the rest of the combinations to see if I can explore what that might be, and what that might mean. Because I don't want to advise a jobless person to turn down an offer. But I want to explore a little bit more. So I'm going to look at the columns, and then I might use some of the Lenormand techniques of knighting, to see, how cards relate to one another, and what color that can add. But going down the row, so this commitment is going to be fortunate and will bring him joy. That's good. Service will be serious. And then we have this enemy. So we've got sort of serious work, that is an enemy. So that I'm not super sure about. Let me look at this row. So I've got reunion, doctor reversed, and enemy. So again, so reunion with stress is how I'm reading this, or reunion with something that has been sort of costly to his well-being. With enemy. Now, I wonder if he has a tendency in his work to make enemies. And that might be something I might ask. Now, what I want to do is actually, let's look one over into, that doesn't really help me much. Enemy and wedding. There's like something that's not, like this coupling, this union, right, is anemic to something. Foe and service. Do these knight in any other way? Reunion, fortune. So I'm not getting much clarity here, but what I would probably say to this person is, it looks like the job is yours, but you need to be aware of falling into a pattern where the people around you potentially are anemic to your health, or they're enemies to your well-being. You know what I mean? Is the community around you going to be an enemy to joy? This could suggest in a way too that the work environment is not going to be pleasant for him. What then this makes me think of is to remind him that this doesn't need to be the be-all, right? This job could be a stopgap, but he has to be careful and thoughtful about being friendly rather than an enemy, friendly to his well-being, so that, the good fortune doesn't come at the expense of his joy, come at the expense of his well-being. So, yeah, you know what I mean? It looks like there's a good possibility the job is his, but he's going to have to be careful not to let these sort of weird energies, contaminate his joyfulness, so to speak. So, but I have to say, like, despite that weird thing, I find reading this way not all that difficult. I don't know what it is about this methodology that is so different to me than Lenormand. It may be the number of cards. It may be that it's easier for me to make a connection to these concepts than it is to, like, the Lenormand concepts. Although when I'm doing fake Lenormand readings, I don't really have a hard time with them either. This is, the Lenormand decks I have, by the way, are like really good ones. I've got Kelly from the Truth in Stories, Story in Color. I've got the Maybe Lenormand, which is the one I have the most success with because I use the whole thing and there's so many cards. And then I've got the 1860, I think that's the name of it, which is beautiful. And then this lovely, and the Gilded Reverie. All really nice. So if I were to answer the same question for this guy, I would probably follow the methodology of, I'm using that word a lot today, of finding the work card, which would be the anchor, and then pulling 4 cards before, rather after in this case. and then the 4 cards in front. Um, so interestingly, he, if I read this way, and here's an example of why I'm such a terrible, example in this case, because I get it. like, so yeah, it looks like he's gonna get the job. Like here we have the job card and then the institution card. So it looks like there's gonna be a grounding to an institution, but that institution has some confused blocks. So there's like something not right again here. There's like a repetition of abuse with this company or this work. But again, we have the luck card in this same row. So the like repetition of the work is lucky, like he's but there's like an abusiveness to it. We have another well-being card here, we have the garden card here, and we have the mice card here. So there's like something for this dude about like his well-being in a community is going to be diminished because of this job. The institution repeats its slowness, or the institution abuses its well-being. There's confusion around the work community. Blockages are lucky because they get taken away. That row is a little interesting to me, kind of like the enemies card. Luck is taken away by blocks is probably how we grammaticize that. So again, it's an interesting thing. But like I never seem to have that level of ease when I'm reading Lenormand in real life. So I don't know. I find Sybilla a little bit easier, but yeah, this is just an interesting little walkthrough of how I've been working with it and how I kind of create context in these sort of old fashioned concepts. You know what I mean? Like, let me focus in here. Like, if the old woman card were to appear, I would say to myself, like, what does that represent? Well, she represents someone who has experience and wisdom. So, if in the context of this card, I would say that I wouldn't say there was like an old lady. I would say there's experience and wisdom at play. Faithfulness is, faithfulness. We know conversation. The thought card, I mean, that's not an old concept. I'd be able to make that work. Scholar, I would say study. I would say the other things, if I think about writing from the Man of Letters, or art from the other 2 decks. So part of what I'm doing is like I'm contextualizing the card in a modern sense. So the priest card shows up in a reading. This happened in a reading I did for a friend yesterday. When the priest showed up, it became about faith. So it wasn't about a man of religion. It was about the idea of faith, having faith in something. A letter is always communication. Misfortune is misfortune. When I see misfortune cards like this, I think about, the Buddhist theory of suffering is. So I wouldn't necessarily predict a fire necessarily, because again, there's rare times. I can't think of, like, if someone said, oh, I'm going to buy this house, should I put in the money? And I got this card, I might say, nah. But widower is interesting, right? Because again, I don't necessarily predict a death for this person's partner, but this represents someone who's experiencing loss or grief. Friend is pretty clear. Consolation is pretty clear. Sweetheart, we talked about. Death, to me, is a stop. It's a period. It's an end point. Haughtiness is an interesting card. I think of that as smugness or arrogance. Melancholy, we know. The servant or the maid, I think about as work, as duty, as job, as in positive and light ways, depending on the cards with it. Your home is your home. The merchant, I think of as business or a business person. Despair is despair. In the older decks, it's despair from jealousy. Hope is hope. Falseness is falseness. Constancy is constancy. The wife is interesting. When I first saw this again in the Everyday Oracle, this is married woman. And again, there's no husband. There's a man card, like a lord card, but it's not husband, which this sort of reflects the dated nature of these older oracles, because the Lord is the Lord, but the woman is the wife. But what I think about this as is not in the same regard as someone who's married. I think about this as partner. You know what I mean? So wife could be someone you work with, who you're working with on a project. It could be a spouse, it could be a loved one, but it could be the partner in a relationship, whether that relationship is professional or not. Love is love. The room is your space, it's your surroundings, it's your environment. Money is money. The soldier I've interpreted as again, like duty, but I've also interpreted it as belligerence or fighting, you know what I mean? So again, it depends on the context. I do prefer, again, as I said, the lookout or the beautiful view, but waiting, is waiting. Cheerfulness is cheerful. So it's like in the context size, I do prefer the longing, but you get the same point. Malady, again, it's like well-being, It's not necessarily a physical illness because I don't read about health. But it could be, a general sense of well-being. Sorrow. Young woman. The young woman is interesting because it could be somebody, but it's not necessarily a significator. And there's no young man card. So I think about, well, what does this represent? And this is one of the trickier ones, because what I don't want to get into is gender stereotypes. But I sort of think of this as adolescence. So there's a child who's like infants, that's new, adolescence. So if I were looking at this as timing, the child would be something new. This is something that's adolescent. It's in the middle phase of its development. And if I had like child, young woman, and old woman in a row, I would look at a progression of the maturity of something. Journey makes sense. Thief is, it's like the mice. Prison is being trapped or stuck in something. The messenger is delivery of news. What does that say? Surprise. Sorry, I'm reading this through the viewfinder now, which is rare for me. So gift, child, Lord. So again, the Lord, what do I think about as the Lord? I think about the master of something, the owner of something, bosses. Again, we want to avoid gender stereotypes there. So I don't mean specifically male bosses, but someone who's the Lord of something, who's in charge of something. We have the 2 enemy cards, and I've never had this come up before, but you work with them and you put them in context. Like, it was so funny to me that we had both cards side by side. Totally rare. Joyfulness, we've seen this. So again, it's kind of like drawing a modern line and then painting context into them based on what you're seeing. So that's how I've been working with it. I find it really successful that way, and I don't feel bogged down by history, and I don't feel bogged down by doing it right, because there's no board of directors here to tell me I'm doing it wrong. There's just people who may comment on my YouTube videos, and too bad for them. So anyway, despite all the interruptions, I hope this was interesting. And it's been successful for me so far, and the readings that I've done have kind of impressed me with their precision. Not that they're better or worse than tarot. I find that this is a little bit better at more fortune-telling-y kinds of questions. But not that much better. You know what I mean? These tend to be quicker than tarot, I will say that. But I'm not of the opinion that tarot can't be specific and terse and useful. It's not just the cartomancies. Tarot can do that too. So anyway, that's my reach. So I wish this video had gone a little smoother, but the examples were interesting, so I decided rather than starting again, I would just piece these together. So be well.